Good evening and welcome to tonight's conversation with the Pearl Harbor Child. I'm Lisa Carrico, Director of Veteran Programs for the Missouri Humanities. We are a member-supported organization, and our mission is dedicated to enriching lives and strengthening communities by connecting Missourians with the people, places, and ideas that shape our society. Since 2011, we have partnered with organizations across the state to provide veterans, military personnel, and their families with an outlet for self-expression through writing and storytelling. And this evening, we have a very special story to share, one that offers a unique perspective on our nation's wartime history. Our guest is Dorinda Nicholson, an award-winning author of Pearl Harbor history through the eyes of a child. She has made it her lifelong mission to connect adults and children to World War II history through stories. Dorinda was 6 years old when she witnessed the attack on Pearl Harbor from ground zero. Her insight and books provide a treasure trove of information on life as a child before, during, and after the infamous attack on December 7th, 1941. She has been featured in People magazine, NBC Today, CBS Sunday Morning News, BBC TV, and is well known nationally and internationally as she visits schools all over the world sharing her story. Her experience as a child of war and expert hula dancer helped create Nanea, American Girl's first Hawaiian doll, whose story is set in Pearl Harbor in 1940s. Prior to the program, we invited registrants to submit questions in advance, many of which were incorporated into the Q&A style presentation for tonight. Whether you're watching on Zoom or Facebook Live, we invite you to be part of the conversation. Do you have a memory, story, or connection to the attack on Pearl Harbor? Feel free to share your connection in the comment section of either platform. And as the conversation progresses, we invite you to continue submitting your comments and questions as we will try to weave them in during the duration of the program. If you enjoy this program and would like to learn more about Missouri Humanities, please check us out on Facebook and Instagram. We invite you to learn more about our membership program, where benefits include free books, discounted tickets to special programs, and access to member-only events. Joining is easy. Visit mohumanities.org and click Become a Member. At the conclusion of the program, a link to a program survey will pop up on your screen. Your feedback helps shape future programs. Before bringing Dorinda on, I'd like to play a short video of Dorinda sharing part of her story with students. I think the video nicely sets the stage to talk more in detail about Dorinda's experience as an eyewitness to the attack on Pearl Harbor the morning of December 7th, 1941.
There in Hawaii. I am Dorinda. My middle name is Makanaonalani. My married last name is Nicholson. And my dad comes in the kitchen and says what so many of the men in the harbor themselves, the guys on the ships, like, why are they practicing on a Sunday morning? It's my dad said that very same thing. Wow, and it's so loud and it's so many, and it's, gee, Sunday morning. And about that time, the house started to shake. From where I lived, I could see the Utah. And the Utah was a target ship. And on the morning of December 7th, it was the very, very first ship to get hit by the Japanese airplanes. And we looked up in the sky, and just barely above our house and barely above the treetops were these bombers coming over. And, you know, I'm 6 years old, so I don't know what kind of planes these are. And I'm not scared because, you know, I'm with my dad. And those torpedo bombers were so low, I could see goggles that covered their eyes. And of course, they were heading for the Utah on their final descent, because the ships are just a matter of a few hundred yards from our house. And the pilots, when they would bank as they'd head closer to the ships, you could see the pilots, you could see their face, you could see the goggles.
Dorinda, hello. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Aloha, everyone. Good evening. Are you hearing me okay?
I am hearing you okay.
All right.
Thank you. And I do apologize to our audience and to you. I am getting over a cold, so I'm a little raspy and forcing the voice out of me. So bear with me.
You sound just fine. And mahalo to all of you who are possibly right now sitting through a thunderstorm watch. Here in the Kansas City area where I live now and over on the Kansas side, I know you're watching closely. So we want you to stay safe during this time. And thank you for joining us during the storm. Makes it even a little more wartime-ish, doesn't it?
Well, Dorinda, you served on the board of the Missouri Humanities, and for years, you and I have discussed presenting a program that highlights your story as a Pearl Harbor survivor. So it's truly an honor for me to see this idea come to fruition today. In the middle of a potential thunderstorm, but especially now as we're in the 80th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack, it seems even more significant. So, Dorinda, as you talked about in the video, the attack happened on a Sunday morning, and residents of the peninsula questioned why there was so much activity on base. And even though you were 6 years old at the time, you have a very vivid memory of the attack and of your father packing up the family to hide in the sugarcane fields. I thought maybe we could pick up the story from there. How long did your family hide? How long did the attack last? And what was your life like as a child following the attack and living in Hawaii during World War II?
My dad and I watched from the front yard, and he grabbed me. We went back into the house and got my baby brother out of his crib and mom, and threw us in the back seat, mom in the front seat, of course, with him, and trying to get away from the bombing. And above Pearl Harbor at that time were sugarcane fields. And my dad felt that was the safest place for us to slide our car into the middle of the cane fields. Sugarcane looks almost exactly like corn, about the same size and height, and a perfect place for us to be. And then, not understanding or knowing and having any information, Dad is twisting the car dial on the radio. And what we hear is the announcer of that time in Hawaii was Webley Edwards. And he was saying, this is the real McCoy, 1940s language for this is no drill. Military, get to your bases immediately. All medical, get to the nearest hospital to treat the wounded and injured. And everyone else, you may not use your phone, and you may not leave your house, and stay in place for further information. And that is it. So not knowing, I'd love to know what my parents knew at that time. But none of the announcements said, this is Japan. There's almost 3,000 people affected, but we could look down on the harbor. And it reminded me so much of the 20th anniversary we just commemorated of 9/11, with the towers that just burn and burn and burn and burn. And I've since realized how similar that is, because the fuel for the burning is the same. You know, those airplanes on 9/11 were fully gassed and loaded. And then the ships in the harbor full of gasoline. And so the ships burned, and from where we were, and if you were on another part of the island, you would have seen the oily black smoke because it just ascended very high. And then when the winds would take it, from where we were, we could actually see the red flames and all the red and orange flames here and there under the smoke. We could not see the men in the harbor, but if we were closer, we would have seen men trying to swim away and escape some of the ships. And in order to do so, they would have to avoid there are large areas of the water on fire because of the leaking oil, and for them to survive that. Again, Webley Edwards comes on with the very same announcement. And now more and more of our neighbors are coming up to avoid the area and being right there in the middle of Pearl Harbor. And starts to get a little dark, and the sun is starting to get lower over the Waianae Range. And then the governor comes on, and the governor says that he has had communication with President Roosevelt. Now, if you were all fifth graders, I'd say, I love fifth graders. And I'd say, okay, who was president at that time? He'd had communication with President Roosevelt, and Hawaii was to start immediately under martial law. And martial law meant it was not our city police or county police, it was the military that would now make the rules and would govern us, protect us. And about that time, here came some Army soldiers, and they told all of us that we needed to go to Waipahu, which is the next town over from us. And this was a sugar plantation and sugar refinery and processing area. And he said that the people of Waipahu would take us in. I think almost like the poor people in Kentucky, you know, everything's destroyed and you need to find a shelter. And so here we are with this town that's going to feed us and provide some pillows and blankets. So I go up to one soldier and I said, before we go to Waipahu, can I go home and get my dog? I mean, I'm 6 years old. I thought we were coming back. We left with nothing. We just ran. And of course, you know what the answer was. The area's on fire and there's no way that anyone could be allowed back into that area. So we headed on to Waipahu, and that's where we spent the night with those of us from the end of Pearl City Peninsula. And I'm often asked, weren't you scared? That's when I got scared. And scared because we're all sitting there, we don't know what's happened. In the distance, we could kind of see flames every once in a while. We couldn't see the oily black smoke, but rumors were starting to spread, like, I bet they're parachuting right now. I bet there's an invasion. I bet when morning comes, we'll be surrounded by bayonets and soldiers. And I bet all our water is being poisoned. And so we're just sitting, sharing these back and forth with no information. And about that time, to make us even more fearful, Pearl Harbor lights up again. And we can tell that there's gunfire going on. We don't know what it is. It took me almost 50 years to find out as I start to meet the veterans and other military survivors. And I'll just tell you real quickly, one of the sad parts of war is friendly fire. And I love what one fourth grader said to me when I asked students in school, do any of you know what friendly fire? And he raised his hand and he said, friendly fire is, you don't really mean to, but you shoot your friends and it always happens. And what the friendly fire was that night, because the Utah was the first ship to take the bombs, the Japanese were looking for our aircraft carrier, the Enterprise. Because we didn't believe a December 7th could happen, just like we didn't believe a 9/11 could happen, the Enterprise had gone to the Philippines and delivering supplies, and the Japanese did invade the Philippines that day, and Guam and Wake. So the Enterprise is coming back, is almost back to the islands. And those of you who know how the islands lay in the deep Pacific, the Japanese Armada, 6 aircraft carriers, are up by the North Island of Kauai. The Enterprise is heading back, and it's by the island, the main island of Hawaii, we call it our big island. And so Admiral Halsey is just sending plane after plane after plane, looking, how we wanted to find them. We never did. And so the last 6 are heading back and request permission to land, sir. Permission denied. Request permission to land, sir. We're almost out of fuel. I cannot light up the ship for you to land. We do not know where the Japanese are. Turn around, go to Pearl Harbor. I will send them a radio message that you are coming. The one survivor, who actually is Jim Daniels from Lee Summit, Missouri, went to school here, said that when they started back in, of course, no lights, can't use the radio, and they're coming back in, that everyone, military, civilian, is sitting in the dark in Hawaii with a gun. And as they entered Pearl Harbor, shot 4 of them down. The 5th one tried to parachute out. We shot him in midair. Jim Daniels was successful in landing on Ford Island. There's a small island in the middle of the harbor with a landing strip. He said as he pulled and screeched to a stop and started to step out of this plane, a Marine jumped on his wing, turned the butt of his gun, and was starting to hit him over the head when his commanding officer, who had gotten the message, stopped him from doing that. So Jim, who went on to write Submarine, Deep Submarine, and some other books of that time, was the only one to survive that friendly fire. I don't know, do you want me to go on and just let you know how we are as kids and civilians in the islands?
Yeah, that would be great, Dorinda.
Okay, so Monday morning comes and there weren't any soldiers, but we all stayed put. We don't know where to go, what to do. And what eventually happens is schools are closed. Schools do not open until February because we need to have the bomb shelters built. We need to, everyone from 2 years old and up has to have their very own gas mask. And looking down to the left on your screen, that's the bag that I'm carrying, and that's my school uniform. And so each person has to have that. We don't get to come home. Most everyone else stayed in their homes, but those of us in Pearl City, the area had to be cleared of unexploded shell casings. And what you see there in my hand, when we got home, we would just go through our neighborhood and we'd pick up shrapnel and bullets. And my dad dug bullets out of our kitchen wall. And then we got the kind of bullets that you turn into a whistle, and we whistle with those. And now martial law. So martial law says no lights on at night. So Dad gets a paintbrush, black enamel, and paints all the glass black. And then we try to turn on a little bit of a light, or I would sit in a closet with a flashlight to try to do my homework. And each street had a designated city warden that really could shoot your light out. I mean, he had that power. And one night, Mom was trying to wash clothes. In Hawaii, we wash clothes on the back porch. And she was on the back porch and she had some light on and came up and said, Mrs. Stagner, you know, I could shoot your light out. Rationing, my dad had an important job, essential job, in that he worked for the post office, and every piece of mail into the islands, out of the islands, had to be read by a censor. And my dad, from the Kansas City Independence area, could not call his mother and his father and his sister and tell them that we're okay. And they know where we live and they know what's happened. You can't call them. A letter is going to take 6 to 8 weeks to go by ship that has to zigzag through the ocean. No after school activities. The school that I ended graduating from, the high school that I ended up transferring to, the very day of December 7th, the Army Corps of Engineers moved in and took over the school and ran all of the operations for Hawaii from our school. They built tunnels, underground tunnels between the buildings. And when, a couple of weeks ago, when we were watching the news of the ship tankers not getting unloaded, that is the way Hawaii receives then and now. Everything has to come in on these ships. Well, those ships are not going to be bringing in your school pencils. You're not going to have your canned goods. You're not going to have meat. You're not going to have butter, eggs. My dad, like most of you who are listening, have families that, if you are a farmer, We need, the boys at war needed your foods. That was also the time that we wanted so many to come up from Mexico to replace our men, to work in the fields. In Hawaii, we were fortunate in that we can grow and we can go to the ocean. But what you are used to, don't get used to, like toilet paper. I had to laugh every time there's some kind of especially during our COVID times, how the shelves were just empty. And we did without toilet paper for 4 years. I wish I asked my mother a lot of questions when I decided that I needed to tell this history and this story. That's one question I didn't ask her, as what did we do for 4 years? My dad, as I said, censored the mail, and excuse me, he worked at night. The men pretty much worked around the clock. I know my husband's father here in the Kansas City area worked at Sheffield Steel, and they worked, hours and hours and hours. So in order for my dad to be out, that black enamel paint that covered the top of the headlights, and then light enamel the bottom, and then you just left a little bitty slip. And then you had to have an ID to be out at night. You were not to leave your house after dark. You could leave in the morning. And we had some friends come for Sunday dinner one time, and we didn't have meat. And so my dad brought home these cute black and white Angora rabbits, Mr. Patches and Mrs. Patches and baby Patches. So for Sunday dinner, they told us we were eating Pearl City chicken. Well, those neighbors stayed at our house too late, so they had to spend the night because they didn't have an ID that allowed them out after dark. Look at Waikiki Beach. That in the background, you see 2 hotels. They're both there. I saw them last week, the pink Royal Hawaiian, and to the right is the Halekulani. And there was just one other hotel in Hawaii at that time. You can't see those hotels now because skyscrapers are built beyond them. But that pink one became an Army and Navy recreation area for all the young men that were going to be coming to Hawaii. And then, there's barbed wire everywhere. That was the face of Hawaii. The women and children got sent away. If you were military, you just waited for that phone call with your one suitcase, and you sent your children and your wife, any dependents, away. And they're leaving on any kind of a ship that could take them away from the islands, maybe one of the cruise ships that used to come. And you went in complete darkness, no trash overboard, no radio messaging. And then overhead, you had a military escort of airplanes. And then around you, you had a Navy escort. Then when you got to California, all these women and children then were sent to live with their families who would live there on the mainland. Getting from Hawaii to California, if you're on a cruise, nice, beautiful cruise ship, takes 5 days. No telling how long it took on these smaller ships who had to zigzag watching for submarines all the way. And that would be how our mail would go if it would ever get to who we were sending it to. When those ships got to California, we filled them with Navy, Army, Marines, Coast Guard. And some of those boys had lied about their ages. They were really, really young. And so now they were coming into Honolulu. Honolulu changes. There are now beer taverns, tattoo parlors. My parents, the uniform that I'm wearing here as an elementary school, my school was just a block away from famous Hotel Street. My school is next to the governor's home, and none of us were allowed even close to Hotel Street. So definitely times of war.
Thank you, Dorinda.
I haven't looked to see if there are any questions.
I don't have any yet. Is there any questions thus far for Dorinda as we're going to move on to post-war. So if you have any questions about her experience during war, I do like how you compared your experience with 9/11 and both COVID. It really puts things into perspective when you think about what we're enduring now and what people endure during war. So thank you for that perspective. If a question pops up.
If anyone, I did a book for National Geographic on, women, children, civilians, more of them are killed in war. And I wanted them to have a voice. So I got an assignment to do children of World War II who survived in Asia and in Europe. I'm wondering if there are any of you who might have been that child or the child of a parent who would have gone through World War II. Because we as Americans, other than the 2 hours of bombing that I went through, if you lived in Waikiki or Honolulu or on another island, you would have just seen the smoke. So you wouldn't have had the ground zero experience. You certainly would have had the 4 years of wartime conditions for sure. But those that I interviewed, say in Germany, my female teenager was put to work in an ammunitions factory. So she was bombed twice a day, once by the Brits and once by the Americans. And then my German male at age 15 was put into the Hitler Youth. And the story that he told me, it's the end of the war, and he's in Berlin, and he pretty well knows that the US is going to be winning. And so he's going through the streets wanting to surrender to an American. And he did not want to surrender to Russia. And a Russian soldier found him and sent him to Siberia. After he served in Siberia, oh gosh, there's so many beautiful veteran stories. He came back to the US, settled in the Kansas City and Nebraska area, and served in our Air Force. And then there's so many stories like that. One of the comments is, I have no idea why there's a glare off one of the bullets there. And I don't know if there are any gun experts, but I don't even know what kind of shrapnel that's off of or what those guns are. The bullet that was above our kitchen phone was about that size. And I did know they were incendiary bullets because on our kitchen wall, you could see the path that the bullets took, and then parts of our roof caught on fire. My interviewee in Japan was 12 years old, and she told me about 1945. It's early August, and we are wanting Japan to surrender. And so there is the bombing and the bombing and the bombing. And the night that she and her baby brother and her mother escape, 80,000 women, children, and civilians were killed by American bombs that night. And they survived living on sweet potato vines, just that the farmer hadn't collected from his crop. There's so many stories such as that. I worked in mental health. I am now a mental health volunteer for the American Red Cross, and I've done that for 15 years now. And Lisa, I completely lost where I was going with that. Oh, I found it. I had a new woman on my caseload, and I looked at her chart and I knew her history, but I was waiting for her to tell me. And I saw the tattoo on her arm. She didn't talk about that for the longest time. And when I think of what she went through, and eventually she gave me, when I got this book assignment, I asked her if she would tell me her story. And that was when I found out what blockbuster bombs mean and what a ghetto really is, and how her family, her friends would disappear. And pretty soon one night, the truck pulls up for them. They're taken to the train station, put on a train, and go down the tracks. And then in the middle of the night, the train stops, the doors open, there are police dogs barking at them. Her mother, father, and baby brother go one way, never to be seen. And she and her teenage sister go the other direction. And she said, they put us into showers. These were showers. And they shaved us bald and put this striped dress on us. And my sister and I couldn't find each other. And we kept calling and calling because here were all these bald women. And we finally found each other. And so she says, one night at dinner, the cook comes up and whispers in her ear, and she says, he says, I'm gonna leave the kitchen door open. And I want you to go in, I want you to get in the garbage and find any leftover beets, beet peelings, anything red, and take them back to your bunk. And tomorrow morning at roll call, when you and your sister's name is called, you will have rubbed those on your cheeks and her cheeks, and you will look very healthy. And it worked. She and her sister to another camp where they made bricks. And that's how she survived because of the kindness of this one cook who must have had 2 teenage daughters at home.
Thank you so much, Dorinda. We do have a question from Susan. If you would want to answer that. Did Japanese and other Asian Americans in Hawaii face problems during the war?
The Japanese had a different response in Hawaii. Most people don't know that Hawaii was almost mostly Japanese. Because of the immigration to the islands to work in sugarcane and pineapple, the Chinese intermarried the Filipinos. The Japanese tended not to intermarry, so there were more Japanese. My Japanese friends that I interviewed all had different stories. My neighbors, when I went up to the sugarcane fields with my family, my Japanese friend who was fishing next to the Utah and watched it being bombed, he and his dad ran home quickly because his dad could speak English. The Japanese community had joined at their house. Well, it wasn't too long before an army truck picked them up and took them up to the same sugarcane fields. But when Waipahu took care of us, they stayed outdoors all night, and it rains every night up in the mountains. So that was theirs. Some of my other Japanese did okay. One of my classmates, his mother was a doctor, his father was a doctor. They took both his parents, put them in what was called a treason camp in Texas, and left him all alone. Lots of different stories, and thank you for asking those stories.
Thank you, Dorinda. Well, Dorinda, you have published several books about your Pearl Harbor experience. The first book you wrote was Pearl Harbor Child, A Child's View of Pearl Harbor from Attack to Peace, and was published after the 50th anniversary of the attack. What inspired you to put your memories in writing, and what impact did this have on you and others?
Well, what inspired me was I was asked at the 50th if I would speak. I spoke with Jim Daniels, the friendly fire pilot. And when I would tell my story, and especially some of my stories, there would be tears. And the Arizona Memorial asked me, please do write this. And so it was first published by the Arizona Memorial, now National Park Service, for about the last 5 or 6 years, now manages the memorial there at Pearl Harbor. And so I now publish my books. The memorial asked if I would tell my story for younger children because so many families come. So that's the Pearl Harbor Child done in color. And World War II, that's the story of the kids from around the world. Pearl Harbor Warriors is the story of, on the left is an American Marine. His ship is the West Virginia, it's sinking. On the right is Zenjiabe. And Richard, even though he was the bugler and he's there on the bridge to blow his bugle, call to colors, da, 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 men are supposed to get up so that, flag goes up 8 o'clock. And out of the corner of his eye, he sees a low-flying plane. He, just like everyone else, says, how dare that American pilot come in here like that? I'll get the number off the tail of the plane. I'll have him court-martialed. And then out of the belly, torpedoes, 6 torpedoes sink his ship. He has to abandon ship. he has nightmares seeing this pilot come right at him because they look almost eyeball to eyeball. So I tell the story. It took 60 years, but I love the story. And I'm doing this story with the citizens of Nagasaki and the Peace Institute at the University of Hawaii. And in our last Zoom, I was the Hawaii speaker, and their speaker was a survivor of the Nagasaki atomic bomb. And we just both cried. Here we are, here I am sitting in Kansas City. This is being hosted in Hawaii, and it's the next morning over in Nagasaki. And how two kids of war. Perhaps that's why I became a mental health worker. And I still keep my license, and I still volunteer with the Red Cross.
So Dorinda, maybe talking a little bit more about Master Sergeant and the pilot and how they did connect and how you've connected since with the pilot and that experience that you had in Japan, and maybe talk a little bit about reconciliation.
When Pearl Harbor Child came out, and I almost felt like I was a little kid again, because here are these veterans and sharing their stories. And so at the back of Pearl Harbor Child, I have the warrior story and I have others, but I thought, oh, the example of bitter enemies. I wanted to share that. So I tell the story actually through a series of letters to my granddaughter, Jennifer, and then tell her what happens. And then I ask Richard Fisk, please share your story. And he does. And then I asked Mr. Abe to please share his story. And I was looking for his, I had brought it here. I was looking for his autograph. So they share stories, we stay in touch. I am speaking in Tokyo and I say, Mr. Abe, I want to visit you. And he has his son-in-law pick me up at the airport, and we go to his house, and he says, I'm giving you and your husband my bed and bedroom because I know Americans don't sleep on the floor very well. And my wife and I, and they're in their late 80s now, we will sleep on the dining room floor. So there's a knock at the door, and Larry and I are in bed, and Mr. Abe comes in and he bows to us, and then he goes over to his dresser and he says his evening prayers. And I think much like he did at 3 a.m. on December the 7th on the lead aircraft carrier, the Akagi, before into his airplane. And then he turns to us and he bows again and he pulls the door closed. And Larry and I look at each other and he said, what are the chances of sleeping in the bed of a Japanese pilot that flew over my house, Pearl Harbor, that killed 60-some million people, women, children, men. And what I am writing, see, I believe words can change the world. And the pen is mightier than the sword. And so if you would go to pearlharborchild.com, I have a video of the special friendship between these two men when they met at the 60th anniversary. And Mr. Abe said, Richardson, if I give you some money, would you buy 2 red roses? One for you and all who died here, one for me. And Japan, I am so sorry. And Richard said, I'm sorry too. In fact, Mr. Abe apologized on NBC Today Show. And so they had this special ceremony. Abe gave him the money, 2 red roses the last Sunday of the month. You would have seen him in his Pearl Harbor survivor hat, bugle under his arm, 2 red roses, going out to the Arizona, tying the roses there, then coming back over and blowing taps.
So Dorinda, we have the video that is from your website, and we can show that to the audience really quick.
Thank you.
Children can learn from the mistakes of the past and maybe teach their country how to spread peace all over the world. There are many countries a small mother house. God, how its own history, culture, and the custom. The most important is work together to understand each other, your friends.
Our friend Richard Fisk, the bugler from the USS West Virginia, has his own special way of remembering. I wanted so much to share this story with all of you. Thank you for letting me do that as a Pearl Harbor child. Aloha.
So Dorinda, I just wanted to share a comment that's in the thread that words can change the world. Amen. Thank you for sharing your stories and connecting us to this history. So part of what you do, oh, let's go back one. Little teaser to what's after this. Dorinda, one of your passions is teaching children about your experience as a child of war. Why is it so important to teach both children and adults about this moment in history? And what one thing would you like your young learners to know about war and turmoil?
I feel we all I don't just feel, we all have a story. And so when I go to schools and I share mine, and I said, but you have a story. And even in therapy, when I would have, especially this age, I would say, what is your story? And how were you named? Who named you? Why did they name you? You need to have this sense of self. And then learning resilience in our Red Cross program that we do for military kids. That's especially what we want to work on. And the mental health of all children, all of us. And we've just gone through COVID. And what is part of our DNA is connection. And part of our mental health, you know, we need a mental health checkup, just like we need to have our ears checked and our eyes checked. Important, especially in this growing up time. So I want to give kids a sense of self. I even tell them that I want to hear from them. And one teacher made the class do a whole assignment on their names, interviewing, oh my gosh, interview your mom and dad. You all, you know, this war was so, listen to how fast I'm speaking, because this is my passion. We all have World War II stories. It may be a great grandfather, mother, whatever, but this war was so huge. And then what is the war that we're struggling with now? And how can we love each other and watch out for one another and serve one another and watch your words? Words can heal. Oh, so can hula.
Well, that's a good way.
The other H
Dorinda. That's a good way to segue into the next part. So your mother was a hula teacher.
Yes.
You made your debut as a hula dancer at age 3.
I did.
You've been on TV. You once competed in What's My Line, where participants had to guess you were a hula dancer. And something neat that you have done is serve as an advisory to create Nanea, American Girl's first history doll set in Hawaii during World War I or World War II. Her
I'm
story,
old, but I'm not quite that old.
I'm going to blame it on this cold.
I know.
Her story is based on your life as a Hawaiian native, a child of war, and a hula dancer. So would you like me to show the video first of you hula dancing or after you talk about being an advisor?
Well, I know we're at an hour, and I know if you have to go, you have to go. But go ahead and show it.
Okay, we'll go ahead and show this video real quick.
Now, those are models and not Nanea dancers.
Oh, okay.
And she took hula from her tutu, and it was in her family, just like it was in my family, and is a big part of my life. Here I am today as a tutu with my mo'opuna. This is Malia, my mo'opuna, Manoa, doing our early basic steps in hula. Knees bent, put your hands on hips. Ready? You're going to step right, 2, 4, right, 2, 3, 4. Head up, good posture, always good posture. The hula, keep your knees bent. All right, we're going to be doing our hands, bring our hands to center. Let's do our hands to the left and to the right. Look at your hands. Look to the left. Keep very level, good posture. Keep those elbows up. No sloppy elbows. To the left, to the right, and we are going to pow and pow
Oh,
So-
that was fun to do with granddaughters. And
Hold on, let's stop this commercial. So before we finish up, could you maybe just talk a little bit about what you hope children and family gain from interacting with the American Doll, and maybe just talk about hula and your final thoughts on war, power, and peace? It's a lot, but I'll let you roll with it.
I love ending with the photo that's down here on the left. When Mattel wanted, when we were finishing up on the World War II story and all, they said, "Who is your charity?" And I said, "My charity is the Red Cross, but I have a special part." I mean, there's the blood division and there's disaster services, and there are lots of different divisions, but I wanted this to be our service to the Armed Forces division. And of course I have to show Nanea in her Red Cross outfit that one of the American Girl doll managers made for me because of my love of Red Cross. So I said, this is where, and they said, okay, fine. So they send that division $80,000 and 50 dolls times $119 plus tax for us to give away at chapters across Red Cross. So the last time I was in Hawaii, I am sitting here in the oncology unit of Tripler Hospital. It's the military hospital that sits on a hill. You can see it from Pearl Harbor. And what an honor it was to give Nanea dolls to these little girls. So I want to continue that, want to serve with the books, with stories. Stories are healing. During World War II, my mother taught hula. I think almost seemed, because of where we lived, it seemed like, I just got the image of teaching all the guys to dance, but we taught pretty much their wives and their children to dance the hula. And hula is healing. That's kind of a whole nother humanities topic, but hula is the language of our people. And it's the way we keep our history, the way we tell our stories, and has been just part of my life forever, and still a part of my life. And so hula, there are more hula studios in Japan than there are in Hawaii, and in Mexico. It's all over the world. I was invited to come to the Czech Republic to talk about Pearl Harbor, and they even had a hula studio there. So if that's something that you want to do, it's available to you. And again, the writing and telling of your history, your story, where you come from, who you are, and passing all those words, kind words, on to each other. And I think the most profound message is we're living and have lived in such a time of power, countries taking over under other countries. So rather than the love of power, would you turn those words around and use the power of love. Aloha for attending tonight. Mahalo. It's been a joy to share this part of American history with all of you. A hui hou until we meet again.
I want to thank everyone that tuned in tonight. Special thanks, of course, to our guest, Dorinda Nicholson. It has been such a great joy hosting this conversation with you. You're truly a national treasure. Thank you for sharing your story and inspiring others to share theirs. If you would like to learn more about Dorinda or purchase one of her books or educational tools, please visit www.dorindanicholson.com or the pearlharborchild.com. This presentation will be available to view on our website and on Facebook. Feel free to rewatch and share. We would love to hear your thoughts on tonight's program. A link to the program survey will show in the browser when the webinar ends. I will also send a follow-up email. If you'd like to learn more about our programs or would like to consider becoming one of our members, please visit mohumanities.org. And I hope tonight's program has inspired hope and reconciliation and maybe even the motivation to get out and learn to hula dance. You can easily find kits too online. So this concludes tonight's program. Thank you and good night.